What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another amazing episode of Culture FC, the weekly soccer show where we discuss all the culturally relevant aspects of the beautiful game. We cover lifestyle, fashion, music, politics, all of the things that surround soccer and make it the game that we love, but none of the results happening on the pitch. My name is Louis, and I am joined here by my two amazing co-hosts.
I'm Alan.
And I'm Brendan.
And this week, we got into a topic that I personally love. We talked about club identities. And what we mean by that is we covered a little bit about what each club represents to its fans, to the people in the world. And we also spent a really good portion of the episode talking about club crests and why they are so different in global football than they are in American sports. With the release of David Beckham's MLS team's crest, Inter Miami, we thought it was a good time to jump into what it means to have a good crest and what makes for a good crest, and also generally what we thought about his crest. If you enjoy this episode, please give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcasting app. It helps us grow. It helps bring new people to the show, and we would really appreciate it. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Google Podcasts, pretty much anywhere that you can find podcasts, you can find us. You can also find us on Instagram at culturef.c. You should give us a follow there because every week we will be posting different things to have you comment and contribute to, and we will share your responses directly in the podcast. So if you want to engage with us, that'll be the absolute best way to do so. Well, that's enough for me. Let's jump into this week's episode. Well, alrighty, guys, let's jump right into this week's news segment. We're covering very interesting, culturally relevant news topics that have happened over the last week or so. So, kicking us off with something very funny, our friend Diego Maradona was recently announced as the manager and head coach of the Dorados de Sinaloa, which is if I'm not mistaken, a second or third division team in Mexico, which, that at face value sounds pretty cool. Great. Guy got another managing coaching job, except for the fact that this club is in Sinaloa, Mexico, which is where the world's biggest drug cartel is based out of, the Sinaloa cartel. So it's kind of funny to think that Diego Maradona, who has been known to dabble, I guess, in a couple of drugs here and there.
He's a connoisseur.
He's a drug connoisseur. He is now coaching a team where he, in theory, will have very easy access to his preferred substances.
This is awesome. Just because he lives the character that he is. Like, there's nothing. He knows who he is as a person, which I can't downfall him for that. He is comfortable with who he is. He lives it. He lets the world know. He let us know during the World Cup that he doesn't give a shit about anyone's opinion on him. He'll go to games completely freaking blasted out of his mind. And yeah, you gotta respect it.
You really do.
He had a phenomenal showing at the World Cup. I'll say that. And then he's kept on par with that upward trajectory of just being the god that he is. And I hope he doesn't mysteriously die one day because of a bad drug, or if the team just is absolute shite. But Diego, we miss you, and we wish you the best.
Do we know his salary, his official salary?
It's probably something along the lines of, all right, we'll pay you $20,000 a week plus a couple pounds.
If his salary is a little too low for his figure or for who Maradona is, then there's some other stuff happening.
Yeah.
Get that pure 100% uncut.
What? But he's not what Rafa Marquez was linked to a drug cartel in Mexico too, wasn't he? He was a figure in.
Yeah, well, that's because the Mexican drug cartel is ever present in Mexico. They have their hands in fucking everything.
I thought it was crazy that Rafa Marquez fucking came out in the World Cup. He played a match in the World Cup after being very heavily linked with being a drug cartel member.
Which is pretty cool.
Badass.
Drug cartels really are.
Maybe they're the new wave, dude. Maybe we just got to get on board. I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. But yeah, shout out Maradona, man. Let's see how he does. He doesn't have that fantastic of a coaching career.
No.
His coaching record's awful. It's actually terrible.
He really got away with being a coach just because of who he is. But
so I guess we now really know what his motivation to this new coaching job was.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, how did he get this job? It's a second division club in Mexico.
Yeah.
He's not Mexican. He's Argentinian. What is the only connection that you could make as to why he'd be there?
Yeah, because
Right.
I'm sure he would be able. He could theoretically probably go wherever he probably wanted to go.
He could have coached in Argentina.
to some extent,
right, yeah, I'm sure he could find a position,
could-
like a role
like
somewhere.
a consulting position for
Right.
way more money.
Right,
you know?
right.
But
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of unfolds. I mean, second division, you'd hope that he'd have, I don't know, a decent team
Yeah.
to compete, but we'll see how that plays out. But moving on to a little lighter news, something a little bit, it's not funny, but it's as kind of uplifting, I will say.
if you put uplifting, in this
We
thing-
put uplifting news out there. But yes, so the other day, actually, Wilfred Zaha was commended for donating, it's not disclosed the amount of money, but donating a large sum of money to the women's Crystal Palace team. And this is kind of coming after an announcement that was made that, and I'm going to read it directly, that the announcement follows a report on Tuesday which said players at Crystal Palace ladies had been told they faced not being able to represent the club any longer if they could not each raise £250 in sponsorship or put up the money themselves. So the women were facing kind of the possibility of not being able to play at all. There wasn't money behind the program. Wilfred Zaha came out and donated a lot of money, which actually kept them up. They tweeted at him and he tweeted back saying, "Hey, it's my pleasure." And Wilfred Zaha is actually a pretty, he donates a decent amount of money, which is cool. We've seen that with like Juan Mata and the organization that he has.
Common goal.
Yeah,
If
Common
you guys
Goal.
were
They,
wondering.
I think they donate 1% of every footballer's salary that's a part of Common Goal goes to helping organizations that need it. But Wilfred Zaha, very generous man. It's really cool to kind of hear that and see footballers not only helping others, but helping the women's football, which I think often gets overlooked.
Which is interesting because it paints a picture of what women's football is in England. And it's funny because looking at how much money the Prem makes, looking at how much money the Premier League makes from TV deals and sponsorships and everything, you think that each of them would be able to finance a team no problem, you know? But unfortunately, as we saw, Manchester United, the world's biggest football club, just launched their women's team like 4 months ago. And this is a club that has more money than anybody on the planet. This is the most valuable sports franchise on the planet, tied with Dallas Cowboys. And they just launched their women's league. So it really shows the sad state of women's soccer, women's football in England. So hopefully this doesn't continue to be the case because, I mean, you shouldn't have to ask your players to pay to play for your club.
Right.
And I think for sure that it's a sad state in England, but it also goes to show that the rest of the world is definitely way worse, right? I mean, if the richest league in the world isn't up with the times in women's football, imagine the rest of the world, right? So there definitely needs to be more attention put on women's football, and it's good to see that players are kind of taking steps and actions to keeping at least the clubs that they play for, keeping the women's sides alive for them.
Yeah, it really shows his relationship and just his value that he holds for his own club. He's not just going there to play and just make money. He's there to play and to uplift others and to really give back to the community that has welcomed him. And I think it's super commendable. I wish more dudes out there would do it, but Wilfred Zaha, man.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what we want to see, right? Is players giving back to the community, giving back to the culture, and I mean, for sure, commendable.
And for our third piece of news today, we're going to reach out and talk about Nike and their recent collaboration with Chelsea and their third kit. Now, Nike has this design. It's called Nike Connect Design. And what it does is when you buy a jersey, you can connect it to your phone using NFC, and players will be able to kind of interact with the fans to some degree, and you get kind of these limited chances to maybe win tickets to go see the game, or so you can access Chelsea's gear first, and you get access to their playlists on Spotify and stuff. So it's really trying to break this barrier of being able to connect with your club. And at first it seemed kind of like a marketing ploy, but as I kind of looked into it more, I thought it was a really cool idea, and it would almost bring me closer to my club as a fan if I could see what they're listening to and almost get a chance to live out maybe a dream come true.
Yeah, so Nike did this in the NBA, I think, with almost all the teams. They have this kind of same technology implemented on the jerseys. And at first, I remember, I don't remember what episode it was here in the podcast, was just talking about that and shitting on the NBA and shitting on basketball for doing that. I'm not going to not shit on it now, because I do think that there is a lot of this is more marketing for me than it is actual connection between fans and players. I think I don't necessarily believe that say Cristiano Ronaldo is making the playlist on Spotify that would connect me to this thing. I think that Cristiano Ronaldo's team might be doing that. That's a more cynical approach to this. I do think the general premise of it is kind of cool. But again, it's more of that little kind of old head mentality that I have of not being totally behind it. I don't necessarily think it's going to be all that between like connecting fans and players, but there definitely could be chances. But again, it's like, oh, buy this jersey, scan your phone, maybe you can win chances to win a game. It all just seems like things that were just making me want to buy the jersey, but not for any like connection to the players type of reason.
Yeah, it feels super extra.
Yeah.
Like, I think cool. Like people are trying to put technology in everything. Like look at smart water bottles that light up to remind you to drink water. Like it's getting to a point where it's getting a little ridiculous. I think the idea is cool to connect to fans, but like you already have a cell phone that is connected at like 1 million like gigabits per second or whatever today. You can access anything in the world on your cell phone. What's stopping you from just going on Chelsea's website today, entering like, I don't know, your email for a chance to win a thing? Why does it have to be a chip on the shirt? It just feels extra to me. Like it doesn't seem necessary. And I guess a lot of technology today might be that way, but I don't know.
Well, you guys are super old heads. And I mean, if you're gonna buy a jersey at say $95,
$95.
Yeah, but this one's probably, dude. The thing is,
like
too, is that I
$140.
bet that this one is gonna
It's probably
be like
more.
$160. Like I don't think this one is gonna be the same price as the regular jersey, just because of this stupid patch.
Well,
And second of all, I'm an iPhone guy, and iPhone doesn't even do NFC, at least iPhone 6, so that doesn't help me at all. So how the hell am I going to connect?
so you're already behind the times, bro.
How am I going to connect, Nike? Explain that to me.
But keeping it along with Nike, we are doing 4 news topics today, guys. You get an extra one.
Yeah, this week was popping with news.
As to keeping it along with Nike, what I find funny is that if you listen to our episode, again, I don't remember which episode it was, but we have shat on Nike's designs for their jerseys for maybe a year now and talked about how Adidas has been kind of killing them and how Nike has been really lacking. But I'd like to apologize to Nike, sort of, because I think that this year they've taken their base template, which, mind you, all of their clubs have the same base template of a shirt, but at the same time, they've done some very interesting things. So this season, Nike, for a few different clubs, has come out with some very, very innovative third kit designs. So for Tottenham, Roma, and Barcelona, their third kits feature a very, really nice artistic design that features the almost like, what is it called? Like a topographical view. Like it's the map of each of these cities. So essentially, Tottenham has their third kit has the map of London kind of embedded into the shirt in its artistic design, as well as Roma has the same thing. It's like a topographical view of Roma in the design, and Barcelona also has a very, it's actually that iconic image of Barcelona with all those like rounded square like blocks of city blocks. They are imprinted and designed right into the design of the jersey. So I find this really, really innovative because it looks really, really good in my opinion. I think the colors they picked for all 3 of these kits look phenomenal. But on top of it, it just kind of really shows the connection that each of these clubs have to the regions that they play in, which is a good segue into our main topic. Before we get into it, what do you guys think of these third kits?
At first I didn't really like them. I thought it was kind of a cool idea, but I just don't really love the look of some of the maps. But as a design standpoint, they have definitely pushed the envelope, and I applaud them for that, as we have pooped on them a little bit. So good on Nike. I don't really love them, but it's definitely a new way to bring new design to football jerseys.
Yeah, I think that this is pretty cool in the sense that not only are the color schemes nice, and I mean the jerseys look good from just a very basic perspective, but especially in today's times where the game is so globalized, it really kind of roots it down to what Tottenham is, or Barcelona is, right? Barcelona is this club that reaches everywhere, every corner of the world, but at the end of the day, it's something that's rooted in Barcelona, in the streets that are being depicted in the jersey, which is something that we talk about. Is like, at the end of the day, if everything failed and it's lost electricity, like it's the people that are local to you that are going to keep your club alive. So it's cool to see that from that perspective of just like, yes, I'm not a Tottenham fan, but if I were a Tottenham fan and I own this jersey, that's kind of on the jersey as being like, I'm associating myself with that part of London, which I think is cool. So I really appreciate the design, and I see what they're definitely trying to get out of it, and let people know that, hey, this is what Barcelona is, this is what Tottenham is, and what was the other one? Roma. This is what Roma is. I don't want to overlook them, but yeah, I think it's definitely a pretty cool idea.
And I think that you just hit the nail right on the head, right? And it's like, these clubs are all massive global powerhouses, right? But at the same time, clubs are rooted in a regional location. And this is a really good segue into today's topic, which is we are going to be talking about club identities. We kind of wanted to dive into club crests, club colors, and all of the things that make and identify each club. Because as we're seeing, these clubs are growing way past their regional limitations in a sense. Like I said a little bit earlier in this episode, Manchester United is the world's biggest sports franchise. Yet it is a club that is located in Manchester, England, and that is very, very important. Some people may argue that it's not, because these things have transcended their original intentions, but at the same time, you can't forget that the people who make these clubs are the local ones, like Alan said. And so really, we kind of just wanted to dive into so for example, why does a crest matter? What do they mean? And what makes a good crest? And that kind of also spans into what makes the identity of each club iconic, right? So for example, both Manchester clubs, they are two of the biggest sports brands in the world, but both of them feature a common symbol in their crest. They both have a ship in their crest. And this is very important because it lends itself to the history and heritage of boating and maritime activities in Manchester. And so this can kind of be seen in a lot of different crests. Like, for example, Portland Timbers have a big ass axe in it, right? And that just lends itself to the region of Portland, Oregon, which has a very rich history of lumbering, and it's how a lot of the people there made a lot of their money, and it's what kept that region thriving. And so these crests, the reason they're important, it's not just because they're an identifiable mark of your club. It's not something that it's not just because you can look at it and go, oh, okay, that's Barcelona's crest, or that's Chelsea's crest, or that's Real Madrid's crest. It's because each of these have deeper meaning than just the face value. And that meaning comes from the people of the region, right? Like, Portland Timbers wouldn't have a reason to put an axe on its crest if there was no lumbering industry in Portland. And that's one of the things that I think I love the most about soccer, is that it extends past just the sport. These clubs are a way to unify regions, right? A way to unify a city, to unify a people. And so in the best crests across the world, they signify and they really exemplify each of these places and cities.
Yeah, what I like about football crests especially is that they're very multifaceted. It's very different from typical crest, I don't even know if crest is the right word, or a logo for a sports team in the US, where it's usually just one thing. Philadelphia Eagles, Star, the New England have a Patriots. They're very just one dimensional, and those things could have some type of connection to the culture and to the society.
Which we see with the Patriots, for example.
Right.
They're based off of the Revolutionary War and things of that nature.
Right. But in a football crest, you look at them, and it's intricate. It has so many things. I mean, you look at a Manchester United crest. I mean, any crest around the world, Bayern Munich is another one that I think of. There are layers and layers of different meanings to every element that was put into the crest, and it's representing the everyday worker, the blue collar, the steel industries. It represents a lot more than just a one thing that is supposed to encompass an entire culture.
And it's very interesting from, I'm going to keep with Manchester United mostly because I'm going to be a homer here because I support Manchester United. But, I talk about the ship in the crest, but you also have the Red Devil, which has deeper meaning. And so what is that meaning? Manchester United was once known as Newton Heath. That was the name of the club when it first originated in like 1880, whenever it was. I'm so sorry. Don't hate me, Manchester United fans. But essentially they became known as the Heathens. And so then people took that to be the Devils. And then the Devil got incorporated into the crest a little bit later on. It wasn't part of the original crest of Newton Heath, but it eventually made its way into the crest. And so, like Alan said, it's multi-layered. It's there's lots of different elements to it. Of course, you have the name of the region, of the name of the club, and different elements in it.
Yeah, I will say there's a super interesting website out there for anyone that's ever interested in like football cresting history. A lot of it right now is mostly Prem and English teams, but the Football Crest Index is a website where you can kind of explore football crest. They all seem to be in the Premier League or English teams, but you can go on and see the different kind of the historical changes that have happened to the football crest, and also see what each piece and element of the crest means, which is pretty cool. But see, that's something that's super interesting because people study these things. They're things that represent not only a club, but it represents different generations of people supporting the club, right? And we've seen this with changes in modern clubs, and we'll get to that in the future. But each club, each iteration, or each crest, and each iteration of a crest has its own significant meaning to a specific time of that club and of the people that support it, which I find super fascinating and super interesting because you'll see one time, why is the Red Devil put in the crest? Why was it put in at that specific time? Why is something taken out? Why? So all of these things and these little changes have significant meanings that go, at least in my mind, far beyond just the aesthetic of the crest and just making it look good.
And even when they do, like with modern times, try to make the club's crest look good, as you say, they still connect it with the originality of where it came from.
Right.
And that just holds true to the tradition that soccer really is, I believe. And a lot of people, I don't think, really recognize that a club's crest really is such a big identifier for who they are and the area they're from. Not just some sick logo. Because, I mean, I would spend hours on FIFA looking for the coolest logo and not have a clue why. Like my favorite one's Derby County. And just that.
I personally love Kaiser Chiefs.
Yeah, Kaiser Chiefs is a dope crest, man.
So, and believe it or not, all those crests probably have so many informative pieces of their culture that we don't even know about. And it's amazing that soccer has that aspect in it, as opposed to, I mean, I know I'm sure like Red Sox and all these other teams we're familiar with have some sort of history, but it seems as if the aspect in soccer really holds deeper than many other sports.
So I have a notion on what you just said, and I'd love to get your guys' opinion on this. Maybe I'm incorrect in thinking so, but it almost feels like in America we want to water down our sports to make it as accessible as possible. Sure, the Red Sox, like people, I can guarantee you that a ton of people in our region here in New England don't really understand why they're called the Red Sox. And if they do...
I have no idea.
Oh, you want to know why?
Sure.
The team in Boston used to play in Red Sox, and that was what identified them from the other team back in when they started.
Yeah. Wow.
So, like, cool.
Right.
But, like, what's the significance?
Right.
And you may think, why do you need significance? But if sport doesn't connect to real life, then in my opinion, I dislike that.
Yeah. And that's a very great point. Like, there doesn't need to be... I personally don't think that there doesn't need to be a meaning behind it, but then you just get a sport. And that's not what soccer is. Soccer is special, and then the reason why we even have this podcast, because soccer isn't just a sport. Like, soccer could just be this thing where every team has a generic logo, and it could be whatever, and it's just something that we watch for fun. It's not something that we cry over. It's not something that we fucking yell at people for. It's not something that I'm punching walls because of. Right? So yes, it doesn't. The crests don't necessarily have to have a meaning, but the reason why this sport is so fantastic and so amazing is because these crests, and not just the crest, but everything that is happening on the soccer related to soccer has a meaning. It has something that connects it to the people that are supporting it.
Which, shout out to MLS 1.0. And to perfectly illustrate Alan's point of what he just said, Google what the original logos of MLS teams looked like. And I'm using the word logos here very specifically because they were not crests. You had teams like the Kansas City Wiz. They were the Wizards that then shorted it to Wiz. You had the New York Metro Stars. You had New England Revolution, which still exists. Sorry. And then you had teams like that. Just none of these things made any sense. The only two teams that have kept their original name from the original MLS 1.0 is the LA Galaxy and the New England Revolution. The only club that hasn't changed its crest since the first year of MLS is the New England Revolution. The rest of them have all changed their crest. Take a look at Real Salt Lake. They became Real Salt Lake. Kansas City changed their name to Sporting Kansas City. You have a lot of these clubs in the MLS who realized that their original names and crests and identities clearly weren't enough. They weren't connecting with people, and people clearly didn't like them. So then they took it, improved upon it, and now we have actual club names in the MLS. And I'm not saying every club in the MLS needs to be an FC or a CF or a Sporting Club or anything like that, because, sometimes that comes across a little generic because you're just trying to be this European thing. But at the same time, as we see with Seattle Sounders, Vancouver, and Portland, those are, in my opinion, very North American styled names, but they all have roots in history. They all have roots in a people. The Vancouver region's very mountainy, so there's Whitecaps. It makes sense. Right. Portland Timbers. I mean, yes, they are the Portland Timbers Football Club, but at the same time, most people just refer to them as Timbers or the Portland Timbers, and that's okay because it has a meaning. It has some of that heritage attached to it.
No, yeah, for sure. I think that the MLS is funny because I still do think that there are some club crests that are iffy for me, where I'm like, whoa, there isn't all that history behind it. Not even history, but there isn't all that much story. Like, I'm still on the fence about some clubs and if this is more of just a logo, like you said before. But I do think that, again, there's nothing wrong with being an Americanized version of this if these crests have meaning behind it and connect it to the same way that you're talking about. So the MLS is a funny case study because the MLS logos have all come in more modern times, in a time where I think people were more concerned about just having that aesthetic of a logo versus creating a crest that was combining a whole bunch of different things. So the MLS is a really interesting case study, but I do think that, especially with renovated logo or crest, so I can stop saying logos, with new crests out there in the MLS, they've been picking up on that more so than ever.
Yeah, I think they've really been able to research what is a crest, and they have taken the time and even asked input from their fans and stuff like that to see what they would really appreciate the most for their club.
But what I find super interesting about the MLS is that each club is pulling influences from other parts of the world for their naming and for their brand identity, or for their club identities, which in a way, in my opinion, makes perfect sense for North America, because North America was completely settled by immigrants. We continue to be settled and influenced by immigrants, and we are a giant melting pot of cultures. Because if you look at crests in England, they all share a common theme. If you look at crests in Germany, they have a common theme or shared elements within them. To give you an idea, in Spain, a lot of clubs are known as a Real something, Real Madrid, Real Sociedad. You have clubs like that because up until the 30s, when there was the monarchy in Spain, the king would crown a club as a monarchy club almost. In other words, they would bestow the title of Real to them to allow them to be, it's essentially like a stamp of honor from the king. It gave them legitimacy. It made each club a little bit higher. So, for example, Real Madrid, originally their crest was just a circle with, was it RM? and like C or whatever
Yeah.
those letters are. And it was just a circle. But then they added the crown right above it, which is its main distinguishing feature today is that crown above the crest of Real Madrid because it links itself to the King of Spain. Similarly, a lot of clubs have the flag of their city or the flag of their region imbued into their crest. In the example of Barcelona, they were never considered a Real club, and which we've spoken about before. They want to separate themselves from Spain. They are very anti. They're not necessarily anti-Spanish, but they're anti like the government of Spain, sort of. So for them, they have the Catalan flag right into it in the crest, and so it's really cool to see how each country has these different design elements. And then bringing it back to the MLS, how each of the clubs in the MLS were like, ooh, I like this style. Because if you were to compare, for example, the Columbus Crew crest, which I personally love, it pulls a lot of influence from German-style crests versus Real Salt Lake, which I A, hate the name, B, hate the crest, and C, hate the colors. It doesn't,
Wow.
because it doesn't make sense to me. There's no king in Salt Lake City. There's no monarchy in Utah. Why are you Real Salt Lake?
Mormons.
You know? And so it's just
Yeah.
a fun. It's I both love and sort of find it a
That
little
sounds
weird.
like more of like a youth team name. Like, oh, we're gonna be Real Madrid B team. Like, you know,
Yeah.
like that's the. So I agree with you on that aspect.
But for a lot of other clubs, it works. I think Sporting Kansas City, it's a phenomenal name. You know what I mean? Sure, they only play soccer. There's no other sports, but does it stop them from having a cricket team in a year? No,
Yeah.
because it allows them to have a full blown hierarchying like brand over all of this.
Yeah.
And this was originally going to be a news topic, but we figured we'd introduce it as part of today's main topic. David Beckham this week just launched the crest for Inter Miami CF, which if you have not seen it, please go pause the podcast, or if you don't pause the podcast, just Google it real quick and take a look at it. It is a black circular logo with a, you know, kind of pendant in the middle with two flamingos, and I personally love the crest. And before we continue the conversation, what do you guys think of this crest?
Love it. Before we started the podcast, I was talking with Louis about how excited I was to see not only just the god himself, David Beckham, releasing a crest, but not having it be like a shitty one. This is beautiful. It makes me want to support this club, and the two flamingos, the minimalistic kind of color scheme used, it just really, I feel Miami vibes.
Yeah, no, it's specifically really great for me because not only does it look good, but it really just it makes sense that David Beckham did it, right? It doesn't look like a crest that David Beckham didn't have any input on. Like you see that he is on this crest. Like a guy that's super fashion forward, he's modern, all of these things, but understands the sport and understands the culture behind it. All of those things got encompassed in this crest, I mean, even the color scheme of it is just like it makes them stand out so much in the MLS and in world football, honestly. And I find it amazing.
And so the reaction online has been 100% mixed. Some people hate the fact that they're calling it the Club Internacional de Football. They're like, why is it in Spanish? And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, you ever been to Miami?
Yeah.
If you can tell me that 100% of the people in Miami only speak English, sure, I'll believe you.
Yeah.
But if you've ever stepped foot in Miami, you know that that city
Go to Miami and try to speak English
is actually the tough part.
Like,
The thing about Miami, if you've never been, it is when we talk about, you know, melting pot cities, Miami is that to a T. It is a phenomenal port city. Its location in terms of Florida, it opens itself up to so many different parts of the world. It's probably one of the busiest airports, I believe, in the United States. So you get people in from all over the world. And it really is an international city. And so for you to call it Inter Miami, for me, that makes perfect sense because Miami is that. You have Cuban influence, Haitian influence, a big Hispanic influence of many different kinds, as well as clearly it's an American city. It's in Florida, but you know you have influences from all these different cultures, these different cities. I don't think any other name would have made any sense if they just called it Miami United, right? Okay, it's not a terrible name because Miami is a very big city. There's lots of other areas, but I don't think it fits what Miami is. And so when you have a name like Inter Miami, which encompasses that international city element of Miami, but then you add these visual elements with, the two flamingos with their legs interlocking, this like a solar eclipse, which really showcases both, the sunny aspect of Florida and also just like the sunshine. And the flamingos is just like, you look at a flamingo, what state does that remind you of? Clearly, you're going to think of like Florida or something like that. So I think that this crest is phenomenal. And I'm going to contrast it with Chelsea's crest. Not that I think Chelsea's crest is bad. I actually really love Chelsea's crest. I think it works very well. But do you see lions roaming around London?
Right. Yeah.
True.
But of course, a lot of English crests, I should probably mention this, they don't get their symbolism directly from the animals of the region. Right. They actually get their symbolism from coat of arms from prior British prior British families who had these animals on their coat of arms. But at the same time, like I said, you still don't see lions in London. So
yeah. Again, but yes, with the whole lion thing not being seen in London, but that is you touched upon it. It's a cultural thing between like, this is a coat of arms. Everyone is doing that type of thing where they might not see the animal but these things are rooted from something historically important to
and not
the people.
necessarily
right.
an
and not
animal
necessarily
being
just the
there.
animal being a part of that environment,
right?
Per se.
And even just the name of the club, it's Club International de Football, Inter Miami CF. And also, they can even shorten it to Inter Miami. I think he has taken every step to what designing a crest, designing a team. I mean, the guy bought this in 2007. Like, that's when he put the money down.
Yeah.
It is now 2018.
Yeah.
This guy has been nonstop working for 11 years. Well, maybe not nonstop, but knowing David Beckham, that cool guy, he's probably been.
He got this club because it was written into his contract. When they brought him to the MLS, there was a clause in his contract that said he could activate it at any point, and he'd be given a franchise at a discount. But anyway, we opened up this exact question to our followers on Instagram, where you can follow us at culturef.c, and we asked people to comment below what they thought about the crest. And our friend Dob Bylan Tivan Elor. Dude, I'm so sorry. I really can't pronounce your name.
One.
I apologize. But he said, about time we have a pink team. And yeah, I think that it does kind of stand out in comparison to the rest of the MLS crests. I don't think anyone else has pink on their crest. And I also can't even think of any club in the world.
Club in the world that has that. It's an interesting. Maybe, what's
Oh, just kidding.
Italian
Palermo.
Team. Yeah, Palermo.
Yeah.
But still,
Palermo have
pink is not
just
a very
kidding.
popular color in world football, so that's definitely cool. I actually have a side note question about Miami. Their crest says Club Internacional de Football, but their actual like Twitter handle and stuff is all Inter Miami CF. Are they just choosing one to be Hispanic, or like what's the deal with that?
Well,
because if that's the case, I kind of don't love that.
Well,
like, I want them to appropriate the culture throughout the whole thing.
Well, I think it's funny because well, actually, I'm going to counter that because the Montreal Impact is the way that everybody in the United States refers to the Montreal Impact. In reality, the name of the club is Impact de Montreal, but only people in Montreal refer to that way. So it's kind of that thing.
Does Montreal brand themselves that way?
I think they do. I think the crest says Impact de Montreal, but all of their stuff is Montreal Impact.
Okay.
Because
I have a problem with that too. I'm not saying that like
maybe it's just an MLS thing.
Because
because their crest says Club Internacional de Football, but then they're branding themselves all as Inter Miami CF. So like not even.
Ooh, just kidding. I'm going to have to backtrack my statements. The crest on Montreal's crest says Impact Montreal, which is actually kind of the middle man of both of these points, is that they decided to take out the differentiator so that both cultures can use it.
I guess, yeah.
I don't
but
think
again,
it's
another quirk of a crest, I guess. I don't really have that much of a problem.
But at the same time, I don't think it's too much of an issue because they play in the MLS, which is a majority based in the United States, where the
Right.
quote unquote official language is English, whereas the second language is Spanish. So I think it's okay. I think it works. It's one of those things where you wouldn't have this in other countries necessarily, because the MLS spans 2 countries. You have 3 clubs in Canada that are part of the MLS, and so I don't know. I think it's a nice little quirk to discuss. I guess it adds.
I guess
a little
I don't
bit
have
of
that much of a problem with it. It was just it's a weird little nuance that I actually hadn't paid attention to before, in the way that they name themselves on their social medias and stuff versus the way that they're actually represented on their crest.
But kind of circling back to when we were talking about the MLS kind of rebranding and redoing a lot of their crests, this is something that a lot of clubs around the world, they will update their crests, but I won't say that they'll rebrand them, because I don't think that many clubs will not rebrand. They'll just update to make it more modern. Of course, the exception being Manchester City actually rebranded their... I don't want to say rebrand either, because Man City just took some of the elements from their old crests.
They modernized it.
And modernized it. It wasn't such a major shift the way that, for example, 2 clubs that I find that contrast very interestingly in this topic are Juventus and Leeds United. Leeds United, for those of you guys who may not really even know what Leeds United is a club in England that is currently in the 2nd or 3rd division of English football. But they were a powerhouse in the 80s. They were, super popular team in the 80s. Their rivalry with Manchester United is legendary, because these clubs Leeds was that big of a club. Today, they're not that big of a club anymore. They've fallen from grace, I guess you could say. But to celebrate their centennial, they decided to take their old crest, which had what was called the White Rose of York, which is a very prominent symbol for their region, completely scrapped the crest that everyone has loved for years, and they came out with a crest that was the most generic, basic, most boring thing on the face of the earth. It featured a guy with his hand across his chest, with what they called the Leeds salute, which all of this reeks of a marketing firm going, no, this would be a great idea. What was the result? They launched it to the fans. They got completely lambasted on social media and torn to shreds, to the point where that this crest never actually saw the light of day. It was on their website, I think, for 2 months as the official crest before they went, you know what? This was a bad move. And shortly thereafter, they completely got rid of it and brought the old crest back. And the reason this is important is because we touch upon this every once in a while about how a lot of international football / soccer fans are old heads, similar to how Alan and I have a lot of these ideas. People love tradition in soccer because they're rooted in something real, right? And so when you just slap your entire fan base in the face by saying, oh, your tradition doesn't matter, we're going to give you something stupid, clearly that's not going to work for you.
No, yeah. I mean, and what makes the sport so special is that it connects current modern times to past times. It connects people of different generations and all of these things. So it's not that necessarily people hate modernization of things. They just hate when you lose the thing that connects so many people, right? So this Leeds United crest, it went from being something that represented a culture of people to having this guy with this quote unquote Leeds salute, but it was this like almost cartoony depiction. It's not something that really looked as royal, as regal, as important as the crest that they had prior to that. So you lose a little. Not only were they losing a bit of their identity, it almost felt like it was a marketing ploy. It was something that was just like, oh, let's make this a little bit more modern, try to connect it to the people, but it didn't feel like that when you look at it.
No, it looks like a straight up Adobe stock option for if you want to create a crest. And it's like, oh, do you want to use this? This is an idea.
Yeah.
You could put any name above this crest and it wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah, just change the colors a little bit.
Change the colors, put a different word.
This is a good Sunday League crest. Like,
maybe
throw it on there.
It's like, and then on the shirt you could say "Dads."
Yeah.
Dad's
That's a really
United.
good crest for an indoor team. I'd be
Okay,
down.
you know what? That's a good point. If there's a Sunday League team out there, take this crest and make
Yeah.
it yours. It would fit
Good.
you.
Yeah.
It clearly didn't fit the
Yeah,
people of
no.
Leeds and clearly didn't fit the fans of that football club. But on the contrary, there was a club that went through a super in-depth rebranding and modernization, which is Juventus. They took their more classical oval logo crest. Sorry.
Yeah.
They took their more classical oval crest that had black and white stripes and the word Juventus across it, and basically turned it into a modernized, stylized J in the shape of a crest. And yet, it seems that the footballing world has either fallen in love with this or at least accepted it. The backlash didn't necessarily exist as much as when other clubs tried something funky. And I have my theory on this, but I want to ask you guys, what do you think of Juve's new crest?
It's tough. It's like a double-edged sword because, like, from a design aspect, it looks really cool and modern and minimalistic, and it almost ties in those kind of black and white stripes with just making it like some kind of frame of a J. But at the same time, you look back at their old crest and you just see this rich, historic crest, and then even they had a zebra originally, and there's no zebra, there's no horse anymore. It's just the J, and it seems kind of like a graphic designer's take on what Juventus is.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me, and I agree with B because the crest looks really good. I don't have any I don't have any issues with it in the way that it looks, but it's still not. I still see it on their jersey, and I think it's weird because it's not what I, in my head, have for Juventus's crest. Like, I still associate them with their old crest.
Same.
I see this on a jersey, and I'm like, what the fuck are they playing with their training tops for?
Yeah.
Like, I don't necessarily think that this is Juventus. So, and like the zebra that they had before, did it have meaning to them? Like, did Italy necessarily have zebras? No. But they created it's one of those things where they created that history over years and years and years and years and years, and it's just something that fits on. It's just now, and I guess I'm reading the football crest index, so it says it's a zebra. I just thought it was a horse.
Yeah.
But that's what I associated with Juventus, and I thought that was who they were. The new crest is nice, and it's a step into modernizing crests per se. It's definitely it's a minimalistic change. It's not something that you're really.
They didn't take the horse out and put it like elephant. They didn't. No.
They removed it and they just simplified the crest, which is chill. But at the same time, I'm like, you're losing a lot of the things that
Made you.
people associate with Juventus. That was my only issue with it, and I felt like their old crest was like iconic almost. Like you could see that and you knew. I mean, other than the fact that it said Juventus on it, like you saw that color scheme, that pattern, you knew what it was. So again, I'm one of the people that are just like, sure, man, but I still don't think that it's. I would, if they went back to it, I'd praise them for it.
Right, and I think that's kind of what the footballing world generally feels. It's not a bad logo. It's not a bad design. It just feels like it removed some of the elements that made Juve. Now, my theory on this and my counteracting point to this is that the most iconic parts of the Juve logo, yes, there was the zebra or the horse or whatever it is that you what you see there. But I don't think that was ever as prominent as the black and white stripes. So this modernistic, minimalistic approach to their crest, basically what they're doing is taking what people call the white space or the negative space of this crest. Because some people look at it and just see the J with another line. But in reality, what they did was they made the shape of a crest and put lines there. And with the negative space, they're trying to symbolize the black and white stripe parts of Juve. Now, that being said, do I agree with Alan and think that the old crest was more Juve? Yes. But this is also part of the conversation because, like we said at the beginning of the episode, clubs are becoming ultra modern global brands. And so this was Juve's step to remove itself almost from Italy and expand into the world, at least in the minds of consumers, because they're trying to build this massive global powerhouse brand. And, you know, you could take that for what it's worth, but I almost feel like if you start to lose that regionality, whatever word you want to use to associate with the region, you will eventually get to a point where if you're not rooted in a physical location, where do you exist? Right. You know, it's like, where are the future football clubs going to exist if all of them do what Juve did?
They're all going to exist in FIFA. That's the only place they're going to exist. Virtual world. No, and I completely agree. That's what I'm saying is like, this crest to me looks like if I went into Google and said minimalistic Juventus crest and some designer popped it up for me, which is cool. I mean, it's what I was looking for. But at the same time, and again, the zebra has nothing to do with Italy, nothing. But it had historical context. It had been there for years and years and years. Someone back in the day chose this and said, here, this is this regal animal that we're going to throw on it. Sure, they're doing the exact thing that we say now that American clubs do. Whatever, but they built up years and years of history behind it. It identified with Juventus, and I don't think that the crest that was before this one wasn't modern.
No,
I thought it was pretty modern for all the iterations that their crest had been through.
Yeah,
and I thought that this crest is fairly modern.
And I think that they could have done, if they felt they needed to update their crest, I think there's multiple ways they could have done it, which would have brought them into the 21st century that wouldn't have been such a drastic change. Right. Of course, the drastic change is actually probably was to make that impact globally as a brand. So you can't fault them for that because that was their intention. But at the same time, someone might argue, hey, there are no horses or zebras in Italy. Right. So like what really rooted it in that part of Turin, you know? But, you know, it's one of those things that I just hope that people don't forget that clubs need to exist physically. Yeah. Because no matter, you know, it could be 1,000 years from now, you're still going to have regions. They're still going to have identifiable traits in these regions. So I just hope people don't forget that.
Yeah, man. Juventus brought into the year 3000 with the Jonas Brothers out here with minimalistic designs.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe we'll look back on this one day and we'll be saying, hey, this is now what represents them and the people.
And maybe they started a trend.
Right.
Yeah, right.
For all of the drastic changes that we've seen in Club Crest taken, like, this is the drasticity, is that a word? The
drasticness?
The drasticness of the change.
No, I don't like that. I'm going to go with drasticity. It sounds like a better word.
Yeah, the drasticity of this change isn't all that crazy. It's just the way that we associate with Juventus that becomes distorted.
Right. Whereas with the Leeds crest, we universally despise it because it's stupid.
The drasticity of that was on a scale of 1 to 10 was at 10, and everybody hated it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so, you know, I think that it's really interesting to take both of these clubs and compare them into how they tried to do it because, you know, Juve did something bold, and it could be that, like Alan said, in the future we look back and go, you know what? That was cool. It works. It's fine. But, you know, at the same time, there are mixed feelings about it.
Right. I mean, and a lot of times, I mean, people are just adverse to change from the beginning anyways. Like, you don't want to necessarily see change. Especially with something that you're okay with
and that you love and associate with your heart.
And hindsight's always, I mean, but there have always been clubs that have made really drastic changes in their crests. But I think you normally can get away with it when the club's a little younger, and when there isn't historical context behind something. Because I would say that if you asked all the Juventus fans out there in the world, if they thought that the crest needed to be changed, none of them would say yes. Right?
Yeah,
and
I feel
a
like
lot
the
of
percentage that would say yes would be so minimal that
a lot of them, and the consumer, the consumer here being the fan, doesn't always necessarily know what's best for the club in a business standpoint, but there are some things, and this will be another topic that I think should just stay true to the fans and doesn't need to be commercialized. I think that there's so many aspects of the sport that can be and are. Yes, exactly. I don't think this needs to be one of them. I think that this is something that if you're going to make changes that reflect the current group of people that support your club. And don't make it try to be just some fancy change that brings hype to your club for a little bit and then all of a sudden has nothing to do with who you are as an organization.
Now, this part is very exclusive just to the video version that's watching this. I just found this picture on Google Images, and this is one of the... this is what I was talking about. This was one way that Juve could have modernized their crest without getting rid of all of their elements. And I'll, of course, put the picture on the video version. But it took the original... It took the brand new design.
Wow.
It kept the stallion, horse / zebra, whatever it was, kept the yellow line, but completely modernized the crest.
Yeah.
This is what I was talking about. There are ways of doing it where, sure, the impact of this wouldn't have been as big as what they went with, but this would have pissed less people off.
Yeah.
It would have alienated less people. It would have stayed true, generally speaking, to what Juve was, and it still would have given them that impact that they wanted.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of what I'm talking about. There are
Yeah.
ways of modernizing a crest, and there are ways to not modernize
I
a
think one
crest.
club that did that we already touched on was Manchester City. I think that they modernized their club in a way that makes it feel 2018. It makes it feel like the people that are Manchester City fans without losing
All 12 of you?
Who, yes, without losing who Manchester City was. Right? They still have that.
They kept
still
the
have
ship. They kept the rose.
all the things that made Manchester City's crest what it is. They kept, but made it modern. I commend them on that change because I do think that they did a really good job.
And the reason that's important is because they were in a similar situation to Juve. Well, maybe slightly different because Juve is the most successful club in Italian history. But in all honesty, the two clubs in Italy that have more global impact are the two Milan clubs. AC Milan and Inter Milan have always been better globally commercial brands, in my opinion, than Juve ever was. And so they found themselves in a situation similar. Manchester City and Juve found themselves in similar situations. Essentially, what they wanted to do was enter the global market as powerhouse brands to allow themselves to continue to grow. Juve took the super drastic change of doing what they did, and Manchester City took it and created a modern crest that still exemplified all of the things that were Manchester City. And so did they both have the right effect? Yeah, at the end of the day, both clubs became bigger global brands, but I think Manchester City did it better than Juve.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And what a day it is when Alan and I are giving props to Manchester City. But all right, I think we've kind of exhausted our topics of club identity and crests and kind of what it means to the people and the fans of each club. But let us know. What do you guys think? Do you think that Juve were right to do what they did? Do you like their new crest? How do you feel about Manchester City's crest? Do you guys think that they were, did they need to rebrand, or do you think that it was a little unnecessary? What do you guys think? Send us a DM, follow us on Instagram, comment on some stuff. We love the interaction.
So that's it, guys. Great episode in the books. Let us know any thoughts you have on anything that we said. As always, reach out to us any of the various ways that you can connect with us. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next episode.